Yesterday or Saturday, July the 4th, 2020, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan delivered a historic speech. And I'm going to play a clip of that for you, a clip that we extracted and put together for radio, meaning that we condensed the file. And I want you to hear what the minister had to say. Of all of the subjects that he touched, the coronavirus being something that the minister had on his heart and mind, and of course we were all waiting anxiously to hear him. And I'm going to play that in a short while. But what I want us to do this evening on the Black Agenda, and tomorrow, I did not intend to go live tonight, but tomorrow night I'll be going live as well, and we're going to deal with the relationship between the police force and the black community, as we would have seen what has been happening in Trinidad, in East Port of Spain in particular, and we're going to really analyze that in depth. But since the Black Lives Matter global protests after the police killing of Brother George Floyd and the transformation and rebirth of consciousness in so many different black communities all around the world, we kind of drifted away from really continuing to monitor the coronavirus issue. And we really might be the ones who need to be paying the most attention to it. We would recall that there was a view circulating early during the COVID-19 pandemic that African people somehow were not being infected by it. And by the statistics, if you looked at all of the countries where black people populated in the majority numbers, they were all very, very low, mainly mainland Africa and the Caribbean. But then a very strange phenomenon began to surface where in cosmopolitan societies or multicultural societies or even majority white societies, mainly America and England, black people were being affected inordinately. So it's like we were looking at two realities at the same time that did not seem to have any congruency between them, which simply means that there's a map or a maze behind it. And it's something that requires deep thought on our part. Minister Farrakhan said yesterday that our virologists and epidemiologists and scholars and medical practitioners and doctors are the ones who really have to come together. And he spoke about a history of treachery when it comes to black people and vaccines. The fact is that black people are dying in alarming numbers and devastating statistics in America and other cosmopolitan parts of Europe. This is therefore not so much just a medical issue, but it is also related to a number of social factors, such as overcrowded residential spaces, types of employment, regular modes of transportation, packed trains and buses, and unhealthy food. And if you really think about it, it is our proximity to an alien culture that has dehumanized us historically, and then after dehumanizing us, freeing us or emancipating us from slavery in our dehumanized state, and then putting systems in place to have us remain in the condition that they placed us in, rather than for us to liberate ourselves out of that condition and become independent as a black nation. Now, unfortunately, many of us don't think like a black nation, but we think about integration into the system that destroyed us, dehumanized us, beat, robbed, raped, kidnapped, and enslaved us. Our consciousness seems to be wanting to incorporate our coexistence into that kind of system rather than extracting or withdrawing ourselves from it and returning to the ancient African heritage or glory or legacy that we once had when we did not have the types of conditions today that are associated with death. When you think about our traditional cultural African societies and compare them to today, I want you to realize that it is only the lures of attractive provocations and distractions and trinkets that are upholding our desire to remain inside a system like this. But it is really a lifestyle that is a death style. It is a lifestyle that kills us prematurely just by being in it. And it's almost like the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, has exposed a comparison between our traditional heritage as an African people and the new kinds of systems that we've been incorporated into, and the intention of Almighty God to separate his people and give them some kind of returned blessing. You see, we're not thinking on that level. Ancient traditional African societies were very different to these Western type Eurocentric societies in a number of ways. In our traditional African societies, we did not have old age homes because we weren't abandoning our elderly. We did not have orphanages because we weren't abandoning our children. We did not have halfway houses or drug rehabilitation centers because we were not taking illegal narcotics that were being trafficked in our communities, destroying our youth. And we most certainly did not have prisons because we did not have a system of injustice that favored the upper and middle class to the detriment of the poorer working class, so that they now had to be in a system whereby living life was almost like prison itself. And now, in the Western Hemisphere, it is as if we have extracted the worst of human civilization and represented it as the best of humanity. And then we're placed in it alongside our former oppressors and kidnappers. And the result has been death. The BBC did a study on diet, foods eaten by black people in Africa in comparison to black people in America. And they said the average diet of some of these black people in Africa, they said fruits, vegetables, and bean soup. That is what the BBC said. And said they took a sample of some Africans in America, African Americans, and whose diet was fried foods, fast foods, burgers, hot dogs, fries, etc. And with this sample study, they switched the two. So the African Americans ate the diet of the Africans from Africa, and the Africans from Africa ate the diet that the African Americans had for a month. And in so doing, the Africans from Africa became sick and showed a number of signs and symptoms of deterioration of their status of health. Meanwhile, the African Americans who were eating the African diet temporarily, fruits, vegetables, and bean soup mainly, showed marked improvements in their health. But you know what the real funny part of that research was? It was that when the month was over, the African Americans were anxious to return to their diet. This is the BBC. So they were looking forward, they were longing to go back to the fast food, the burgers, the fries, and whatever unhealthy foods that they were eating. But the Africans from Africa, on the other hand, wanted to stay on the African American diet because somehow they got hooked on or lured into this new kind of strange food with these strange artificial flavors, with this chemicalized, processed type of taste that was so extraordinary to them. But they liked it, and they liked it quick. But the funny thing is, that was the death. And that is symbolic of our entire Western lifestyle. The Final Call newspaper, in an article entitled COVID-19 State of Emergency for Black America, dated April the 10th, 2020, said that data and deaths are showing blacks are disproportionate victims of the COVID-19 pandemic based on health and other problems rooted in historical oppression and inequity. It quoted Dr. Benjamin Chavis of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, he's the president and CEO, who said, quote, Black America is now in a state of emergency as a result of the disproportionately deadly impact of the coronavirus pandemic on families and communities. He said, before the spread of the coronavirus, Black Americans were already disproportionately burdened with multiple pre-existing health conditions, including asthma, diabetes, and heart disease. And our communities are more vulnerable to the impact of the coronavirus, including higher rates of fatalities. Then the article in the Final Call says, a major problem is that in many multi-ethnic societies, African people are the victims of institutionalized racism, which is a form of disguised injustice that gets lost in the conversation of false equality, equity, and national unity. We end up all being programmed and eventually convinced that there is no racial inequality within our societies, which comes with a subtle suggestion that the evident inequality is as a result of our own inferiority. A Guardian newspaper article, April the 6th, we're going back some months here, entitled Data from the United States South shows African Americans hit hardest by COVID-19. Now, bear in mind, there have been diseases that have been manufactured in laboratories that have targeted black people. But the coronavirus looks like it might be that based on the charted statistics, but really it is like a virus that targets the conditions that we are living in. It's very peculiar. Data from the U.S. South says the coronavirus is disproportionately infecting and killing African Americans across much of the South, a region where black Americans are more likely to live in poverty and suffer from already chronic diseases. Georgia's Department of Public Health began releasing the racial breakdown of confirmed coronavirus cases, saying 20% of the 9,901 confirmed coronavirus cases are black, compared with 15% who are white, in a place where the majority of the population is white. We had all of these statistics. Chicago is 30% black, but had 70% of the deaths from the coronavirus. Louisiana, 32% black, but 70% of the coronavirus deaths. Michigan, 14% black, but 52% of the COVID-19 deaths. Milwaukee, 26% black, but 66% of the COVID-19 deaths. Illinois, 14% black, but 46% of the COVID-19 deaths are black. Mississippi is 38% black, but there are 71% of the deaths from COVID-19 black. and Alabama, 27% black, but 54% of the COVID-19 deaths black. And the statistics go on and on and on and on, showing these alarming, shocking statistics. And then this is added to the complexity of institutionalized racism, because with some of these numbers going out, we were now victims of racial discrimination even in China, which has been identified as the place from where the COVID-19 emerged from, Wuhan. The Financial Times published an article entitled China-Africa Relations Rocked by Alleged Racism Over COVID-19. Again, we're going back to the month of April 13, 2020. It says Africans in Guangzhou were evicted from hotels and had passports confiscated, officials said. Chinese-African relations have been plunged into crisis after African officials reacted furiously to allegations that their nationals were being routinely discriminated against in Guangzhou, southern China, as alleged potential carriers of the coronavirus. Us. Video posted on social media showed people of African descent being evicted from homes and hotels, sleeping on the streets, and being refused service in shops. We black people are the victims of this kind of racism in societies when we don't even have any disease. And now we're being identified as being victims of the coronavirus in inordinate numbers, so it's like they're adding to a racism that already existed. Widespread reports alleged others have been forced into quarantine despite testing negative for COVID-19. African ambassadors in Beijing, China, wrote a letter to China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, seen by the Financial Times, condemning what they said was the persistent harassment and humiliation of African nationals. Families with young children have been forced to sleep on the streets, and passports of African people have been confiscated, they said. And the singling out of Africans for compulsory testing and quarantine, in our view, has no scientific or logical basis and amounts to racism towards Africans in China, flagging the possibility of a backlash against the Chinese diaspora living on the African continent. A second letter obtained by the United Nations officials and signed by a group called the All-African Community in Guangzhou accused China of being at war with Africa. The letter said, or referred to, the inhumane treatment, hatred, and outright discrimination of Africans that is currently going on in Guangzhou, China, is beyond expression. And then finally, another article from the Final Call newspaper entitled State of Emergency for Black America continued, but it's not just the health status of blacks that makes them more susceptible to COVID-19. It is also their place in the workforce and in society. We see this, while those in the managerial class work at home and use teleconferencing to communicate with one another, less than 20% of black workers have this capability. We see this dichotomy play out as a group of mostly black sanitation workers who carried out a one-day work stoppage. And it goes on and on and on and on. So we cannot afford to become too complacent about this. And we have to, at all times, keep in tune with that history of treachery. We have always, as black people, been targets of chemical and biological warfare and medical genocide. It goes back to 1766. General Jeffrey Amherst, who took blankets that were infected with smallpox to the Native American Indians up on the reservation as gifts to kill them off and then take their land. Then in 1932, there was the Tuskegee experiment, where 100 black men were deliberately infected with syphilis by the United States Health Department through their government, and had their vital signs and symptoms monitored for 40 years while going for treatment at United States government clinics from 1932 to 1972. A deliberate biological experiment on black men for which President Bill Clinton apologized for in his presidential capacity. But at his apology in 1996, there were only 4 survivors. You had the cancer-causing monkey virus, SV40, in injections. Again, cancer experiments. And then you have the major one, which is HIV/AIDS. June the 9th, 1969, Dr. Donald MacArthur writes to the United States Senate requesting $10 million to complete research to create a synthetic biological agent that has the ability to destroy the human immune system. 1972, World Health Organization issues a bulletin stating the value of doing that research. United States Government National Security Study Memorandum number 200 dated April 27, 1974 identifies as their top national security objective to reduce population in third world countries. And they say, because America has 6% of the world's population, but they use 34% of the world's mineral resources. And those mineral resources are not in America or Europe, but they're in Africa, Asia, and the third world. And the population growth of third world peoples represents a direct threat to the availability of those mineral resources to the American population. So, President Richard Nixon, avoiding impeachment, resigns. His vice president, Gerald Ford, comes in. Gerald Ford loses the election to Jimmy Carter. And then Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, in the same way Nixon had Dr. Henry Kissinger, Jimmy Carter now has Dr. John D. Rockefeller III. And in the same way, under the Richard Nixon administration, Henry Kissinger talks about depopulating the world. That's the Republican Party. Here, the Democratic Party comes in and comes up with a plan called Global 2000. And this Global Project 2000 had as its main objective to reduce world population from 5 billion people, as it was in the year 1975, down to 2 billion people by the year 2000. This isn't some drunk people in a bar discussing this on some street corner. This is the government of the United States of America through their national security corridors. These are the kinds of conversations that go on. And so when President Jimmy Carter's advisors issued that declaration, then the same $10 million that was requested by Dr. Donald MacArthur 7 years earlier was now granted. Look it up for yourself. House Bill number 15090, 91st Congress, first session. The research was to take place in Fort Detrick, Maryland, at the P4 laboratory. And then 2 years later, 1978, something is invented. We don't know what it was. But there were 2 hepatitis B vaccination campaigns on homosexual men in America. The first one on 1,083 homosexual men in New York. That was phase 1. The second one, 1,452 homosexual men in 5 other cities: Los Angeles, San Francisco, St. Louis, Denver. And those homosexual men were the first men in America to get AIDS. First men in the Western Hemisphere to get AIDS. All from an injection from the Center for Disease Control. Meanwhile, over in Africa, the World Health Organization went on a smallpox eradication campaign. And this smallpox vaccination campaign it is said, infected 11 million Africans with AIDS. Okay, what are my references for this? Well, we first heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talk about it in the late 1980s, early 1990s. But then front page of the London Times, May 11th, 1987. Front page of the London Times explains that this smallpox vaccination campaign in Africa, it quotes the World Health Organization as admitting, coming up with some theory about green monkeys and how we used to eat the meat of the green monkeys in Africa, and when they gave us the injection for smallpox, it somehow aroused a dormant HIV infection that was on the African continent through the consumption of the monkey's green meat thousands of years ago. And they gave us that explanation to explain how their smallpox vaccination spread AIDS by the millions in Africa. Then here come the pharmaceutical companies as saviors. Minister Farrakhan also said on Saturday, we have to reconnect with our brothers and sisters in Cuba, some of the most brilliant medical scholars and scientists whom we trust. And look at us in the Caribbean. Look at Trinidad and Tobago. Look at how many politicians we have had who have gone over to Cuba for medical treatment. But yet still, we too often stand in solidarity with America putting their embargoes on Cuba. It's sad. And when we had the Summit of the Americas conference in Trinidad, and President Obama was here, all of those leaders of Latin America and the Central and South American countries, all of those Spanish-speaking countries, one by one at the summit, stood up and said, we are standing with Cuba. Cuba should have been invited. We're not going to tolerate the disrespect towards Cuba. And each of them said that, one after the other, in the face of America. But we were a bit too quiet on that. And now, Cuban doctors have been sent all over the world with the COVID-19 to help out. And so we need to reestablish our connections and ties with Cuba. Now, I'm going to run for you this clip. So those of you on Facebook, I want you to share this, because this is a very important clip, well packaged, well put together. Share this with our brothers and sisters who we want to hear this information. So, this is an excerpt from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his historic speech, which has been identified as possibly his last speech, or at least his last speech in a very, very, very long time. This is an approximate 10-minute excerpt of the minister speaking about some current affairs with the black community, especially as it pertains to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to listen to this for just about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to come back to close off with you.
That's why you founding fathers could never make the Constitution real for us. That's why you make laws and you break them. You make promises and you break them. But now, what will you do with Corona? A pestilence from God.
Yes, sir.
What will you do?
Yes, sir.
What can you do? You're at your wit's end. I say to my brothers and sisters in Africa, if they come up with a vaccine, be careful.
Yes, sir.
Don't let them vaccinate you with their history of treachery through vaccines, through medication. Are you listening?
Yes, sir.
I say to the African presidents, do not take their medications. I say to those of us in America, we need to call a meeting of our skilled virologists, epidemiologists, students of biology and chemistry, and we need to look at not only what they give us, we need to give ourselves something better. So my teacher told me, don't speak for some, speak for the whole. And now I'm speaking for Black America, for Hispanic America, for the Native American, and for those who are desirous of life. They're making money now, plotting to give 7,500,000,000 people a vaccination. Dr. Fauci, Bill Gates and Melinda, you want to depopulate the earth. What the hell gives you that right? Who are you to sit down with your billions and talk about who can live and who should die? That's why your world is coming to an end quickly, because you have sentenced billions to death, but God is now sentencing you to the death that you are sentencing to others. So whether I'm present or absent, the Executive Council of the Nation of Islam must call our scientists. Come and let's sit down. Our virologists, our epidemiologists, those of us who know the science. We cannot let them bring anything to us that we don't dissect. Don't you take a vaccine unless you say to our people, we've checked it out. And you better be of the truthful ones. But Farrakhan, if we don't take the vaccine, we're sure to die. You're dying for sure now. They want to quicken death. Yes, brothers and sisters, they are in the Bible as the pale horse of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The pale horse had a rider, his rider was death. And everywhere that pale horse went, hell followed behind. This is your history. You're angry with me. I'll take it. Because the two that back me are very angry with you. And the righteous are becoming more angry with you with every passing day. Imagine some Caucasians sitting in a room plotting the death of 2 to 3 billion human beings, calling them useless eaters. That's Satan. That's the mind of Satan. You know how Satan's mind begins? It begins with these words. When asked, why didn't you submit when I commanded you? And the satanic mind says, I am better because I am made of fire, while he is made from dust. The moment any of you, any of us, begin to think we are better, we start mistreating those whom we think are less. So white people think naturally, this is not a fault, this is their nature, that they are better. Look at the words. Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. How did the Caucasian come into existence? You can bring your scientists and we'll sit down. Right. Because my teacher said if you can prove one word that he taught us as false, he will pay with his life. And I am his student. I'll pay with mine because I believe in every word that he taught. You're not a natural man. You're a grafted man with a birth control mechanism, killing the darker, saving the lighter, marrying the lighter on to the lighter, killing the darker of the lighter, marrying that on, the lighter with the lighter, until you get black, you get brown, you get red, you get yellow, you get white. And when the white man was made, his father was a liar, his father was a murderer. So they're born with lie and murder in their nature. How do they lie so easily? If you could read the record, the police records of what they say in their reports that they write, they have concocted lies to justify their murder of our brothers and sisters. Why are the police quitting now? You should all quit. Because if your presence there thinks that you're going to come into the black community and do what you've been doing, you better quit. The jump out boys better stay in the white community. Don't come where we live and jump out, because you may never get back in. Real talk now. We can't take it no more. We won't take it anymore. So you develop your vaccine. Mr. Dershowitz, listen to the words of God from my mouth for you. You're such a skillful deceiver. You deceived your brothers in the Senate to vote not to impeach Mr. Trump. You were very skillful. But see if you can impeach the wisdom of God. You're Satan, masquerading as a lawyer. Satan, walking in full sight, deceiving whoever they can deceive. That's Satan. Mr. Greenblatt, you're Satan. Those of you that say that you are Jews, I will not even give you the honor of calling you a Jew. You're not a Jew. You're so-called. You're Satan. And it's my job now to pull the cover off of Satan so that every Muslim, when he sees Satan, pick up a stone, as we do in Mecca. Did you hear me, Brother Abdul Malik? When you know who Satan is, you don't have to kill him, no. The stone of truth. See, that's what you throw. Allah says, had we wished to take a pastime from before us, surely we would have done it. Nay, we cast truth at falsehood till we knock out its brains. Every one of you that knows the truth, stand up and tell it from the mountaintop.
And there you have it, beloved. That was an excerpt from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan speaking on Saturday, July the 4th, 2020, which was actually the 90th anniversary of the Nation of Islam. And we will be continuing to dissect that message, extract clips on a number of different things that was said, but I hope we listened very closely and carefully to that, and we can hear the entire speech on www.blackagendaproject.com, the online radio station, or go to the TuneIn app. Just look for Black Agenda Project Radio and you'll find it. The entire speech is just over 2.5 hours, and it addresses so many powerful issues. So, beloved, as I said, it wasn't my intention to come on tonight, but I'm going to be back on Facebook Live tomorrow evening from 9:10, and I'm going to address the issue of the relationship between the black community and the police. We're going to look at the whole history of how it got to how it is. But we're also going to not just analyze the history and sociology of it, but we also are going to look at some solutions to that. Because even with the gang peace treaty in Trinidad currently, if the community is at war with the police or the police are at war with the community, that's still like two gangs of black people that need to be at peace with one another. See you tomorrow, inshallah. So let me open up the telephone lines and take your calls. It's 6 minutes past 10. 342-0081 and 466-5391. So we are, for the first time in quite a while, revisiting the conversation on black people and the coronavirus. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Oh, I thought I answered that. Sorry about that. Please try calling us right back. 342-0081, 466-5391. Our landline is also up and running. The number is 622-3303. And of course, we are expecting some live political broadcasts over the next 4 weeks or so, leading up to the election, general election scheduled for August the 10th. But of course, we'll be coming on after those broadcasts. Yes, good evening, call you on the air.
Yes, good evening, Brother David.
Yes, sir.
I think this topic on COVID should not stop. For the simple reason, I'm looking at the elephant in the room. Silently, this government is just accepting everything that is dished out around COVID-19 to restrict us as a people, restrict our freedom. This mask, there is no science behind wearing a mask or physiology behind wearing a mask. I observed today in Port of Spain by HDC office, people standing up in the rain with this mask to go and pay a bill. That is not right. And to the life of me, people just accepting this all over, wherever rain is, and they just, this social distancing. I mean, if we was meant to be socially displaced, how this world could have grown? It would not. And the idea behind this COVID, there is this group from India, a group of scientists. I got this information since before we had this lockdown in March, which these scientists, they call them the Prashant Pradhan group from the Institute of Indian Technology. They use the Watson computer and they decipher, they strip the virus from what it is, and they discover the very same HIV in it. The very same HIV, 4 splices of it in it. And also the reason why it is affecting black people, there is something called the ACE2 inhibitor, which is attached to the viral strain that black people are lacking of. They have it, but not much of it. So that mechanism is used to, it cannot differentiate between salt and water. And because it cannot do that, the virus have free reign to infect the black community. So I want to make sure that you continue along this path. There's a lot that I have to say due to you. When Dr. Mohammed came here, I ended up getting on the bandwagon and purchasing a lot of books. And so I have a lot of information.
You're talking about Dr. Aleem Mohammed back in 2003.
Yes, because I used to follow you from since Mount Hope, as I make mention to you the last time. So I have a lot of information. I have an idea. I have pictures of the virus, what it looked like. So I would like to share it with you whenever and on whatever time do you become available at your institute. I don't have an idea at the time. I would like to come and participate in the meetings and so.
Yes, well, we're opening back up soon. In fact, from this Friday, we're resuming Juma. So Juma at Fridays at the Kwame Ture Center is from 1 o'clock in our masjid area. And, I mean, we speak on a lot of topics at that. And then, of course, there's a prayer at the end. But, you know, our people are more than welcome to come. Even if you're not participating in the Juma, there are chairs to sit down on and just listen to the discussion, the issues that are raised. So that's every Friday, 1 o'clock, where I conduct the Friday Jumas. It's normally exactly 1 hour.
Okay. Well, I will have to run away from work a little bit to get involved.
Well, if you're a Muslim, by law and by right, you are to be given at least 1 hour off. That's the law of the land.
I'm not a Muslim.
I know. Well, first of all, at least you don't call yourself one. We're all Muslim by nature because it simply means it's obedience or submission to the will of God. But I hear you. But that's the law.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, my brother.
But actually, the virus have HIV in it. There's no doubt about it. So, okay. One of the things that I also found out that the company they call Moderna in the United States, they already make the vaccine. It is MNR 1273. And you wouldn't believe the person who is behind that, who have majority share in that company, Mr. Bill Gates. Also, the company, the institute that rated Trinidad highly, which is Oxford University. Bill Gates is also the sponsor of the lab. So the footprint of all this is Bill Gates. Fauci, when Donald Trump entered office, he made mention of this regime is going to suffer an unfortunate pandemic. How he know that? So this was not done by the Chinese. Don't let them fool you with that. It was done through DARPA. And I'm sure you know what DARPA is. DARPA is a section of the Pentagon in the United States. They are the people who just make all the tasers and the lasers and all these different things to maim humanity. This is where it comes, because for years, they spent millions studying the coronavirus. So.
All right, my brother.
Well,
thanks so much for your call.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Good evening, caller.
Good evening, good evening.
How are you doing?
I am good, Gistan.
Great.
And how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Gistan. I want to touch on something that you mentioned at the beginning of the program. And you spoke of it before. I think it was on Saturday or Tuesday night, which was the thing that the person posted on where they post all these things. But they said when they stop killing each other, they would turn on us. And David, when you spoke of that, I was on my bed here and I was moved to tears. I was moved to tears because that speaks volumes.
Yeah, and it also speaks for volumes of people.
Of course.
Yeah, a lot of people who feel and think that way.
What these young African men are up against. And that is one of the biggest tools that they use, because this thing where they talk about turf and turf, they pit them against each other, so they would be always fighting against each other. And what was even more hurtful was when I heard this person, what's his name again, the person who is running the police thing there.
Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith?
That's the person. Talk about the Rasta gang and the Muslim gang come back together to form against the police.
As if it's a bad thing. I mean, the police part is bad.
I couldn't understand it. You have a portfolio, you have and you talking about, instead of saying, well, it's a good thing, we are glad that these gangs are not fighting each other, or out of evil cometh good, or something. Instead of that, he's saying that they come together to be against the police. He saw nothing good about that. And this person putting up a post and saying, when they stop fighting each other, they will turn on us. So they're going to find ways now to keep them fighting against each other. You see what the young African male is up against. What the young black men are up against. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And like I said, tomorrow, inshallah, we're really going to comb that issue of the relationship between the police and the black community. Caller, good evening.
Good evening, my brother.
Good evening to you. Hey, how are you doing?
I am good.
Excellent.
Tell Roxanne I'm going to flog her. Tell her that passless waiting. Long time. It's overdue.
Oh.
All right. Brother David.
Yes.
No, but as the lady says, not the Mr. Griffith said that, they said that. They sent the message. What you want them to do? Yeah, but Brother David, I was saying, my take on this whole issue here is that I am hoping that the committee that the Prime Minister put in place, I hope they would widen it to include you. I don't know if I heard your name called. Did you?
No.
Was your name? All right.
No, it wasn't.
Well, I'm hoping so. Anyhow, I think it was a good thing that they want to get back into again. But my take on it is that I don't want them to do like the last time. Don't take any money and just give it to men. What you call them? The council, the elders then. Who you call them?
The community
gang
leaders
or community leaders, or you call it. To paint buildings, to pay out so much money a day to think boys just get a little work for the time, and then you're looking for another project, and then one person get all the money, and then they have fighting among them who ain't getting enough. And listen, my suggestion is that they need to open back the youth camps they had and open one or two more. Because, Brother David, we are suffering for skilled labor. You see how many, and I'm telling you, because the young men here, there is work, but what they would work, get here, from our local people, they wouldn't want to pay them anything that the boys would want to. You see how the Venezuelans come here and half of them working? Because they're taking the scraps. I am saying the young men here need to learn a trade. If you're not academically inclined and you didn't have no O-levels or A-levels and you think you passed that stage, obviously you will still have to learn to read and write and count. But I'm saying, Brother David, we need plumbers. We need masons. Any job is a good job once you're honest and it is well done. We need tileers. Look, I'm still waiting on a man to come to finish, change the tiles, the suspended ceiling. that I was doing home here. So, Brother David, there is work out there, but then you cannot hire somebody who does not have a skill. So I am saying open these, and along with these skills, I want them to get discipline too, you know. I want them to know what it is to wake up an hour in the morning early, go and run a mile or two. Some discipline, Brother David, and a trade. And equip yourself that you can be self-employed. And I think that will go on. They have to start at a certain age, because tell me how you think they could break or revolutionize the minds of the older ones. Because I think they're set in their ways. Could it be changed, you think? Could they be changed?
Yes, I mean, most certainly can. Culture itself changes.
All right, because I was saying start with a certain age group and move up with that, because the work in your community, you will stay there and do the work, so you won't have to quarrel when they bring somebody from outside. Anyhow, I don't want to be much longer. Let somebody else come in. You have a wonderful night and get home safe.
All right, Zena, thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much for your call.
Bye-bye.
Caller, good evening.
Pleasant good night to you, Brother David Mohammed.
Good evening to you. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, actually. David, let me tell you something. You know, I have always been very vocal for the Black community. And I am saying is that as much as the caller just rightfully said, there are skills and there are things to do right now. But you look at you, David, you have spoken all over internationally and regionally for the Black community. But yet still, we can see that the Muslim and the Rastas came together for a common cause, right? And why not they don't come together for the same cause that the killing of each other, someone who looks like us, right? And I am saying the government have put measures in place for skills and all these different type of things that the other caller just mentioned before, but yet they don't want that. They are influenced by the high heads to do that, so they will continue to oppress them. I think, David, our people, I would say our people because I've grown and bred in a Black community, our people are lost. And how could we find them back? You yourself, David, and that is my question, my big question to you. You yourself, fighting for this Black community, but yet still because of the protests, they are able to come together for a common cause. Why you couldn't do that, and why you couldn't solve that problem, right? Why you can solve that problem, right? But I just want to see how things are going forward, and I must commend Roxanne for going down on the Beetham estate to highlight the same cause that I'm speaking about. But I am asking you as a big intellectual person who I look up to, how come you can bring that community together? That is my big question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, you know, when something like that happens, it's hard to say exactly what exclusively was the cause. I mean, that would have been the result of so many different efforts from so many different people in so many different areas within the community, so many conversations, so many meetings. So that when this opportune time presented itself, you would have had the cumulative effect of all of those discussions in the past. Sometimes it gets to the point, the breaking point, or the point where we say, okay, we can't take it anymore, or it's time now. So, you know, it's almost impossible to measure exactly what the past effect would have been. But I hear you, though. I hear you. Caller, good evening.
Good evening, Brother David.
Yes, good evening to you.
Okay. I wouldn't want to make a generalized statement about all Black youth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people will make a generalized statement. What I would like to add or say is that within our giftings, within ourselves, there should be some form of mentoring in discovering self.
Right.
In terms of where a lot of people today are doing jobs, or if they have jobs, they are doing it just because of the salary and not really the love. And I think that gifting that God has given each one of us, that could be the livelihood of our existence and being, and that can be the source of our income. And a lot, the area of where what education has done is that I noticed as a former teacher in terms of art that a lot of parents would like to see, and I mean, I'm not saying all, but those who have parents want to see their children do something that they never done when they are growing up. But actually, even though most children and good and well informed teachers will recognize the inner talents of people, and it has to stem from the home and then on to the school and community, and we have to look at the other generation coming up. And the education system slightly has failed because of what we call compulsory subjects. In other words, for instance, music can be art has part of maths in it. Some people like myself may not be gifted in maths or the academia that connects to maths. But if we show it the other way around, where music and art and even sport has maths in it, then they will see the importance and it becomes part of the livelihood. So I feel the encouragement and motivation of the government, they only have a part to play, but the government should try to look at what giftings each person have when they are unemployed and actually providing a service in terms of, getting a questionnaire on each individual that they will have what they want out of life, rather than just presenting mission to be a mason, to be have something that each individual can say, well, look, this is what I want, and provide those services as an investment to their being. I think in that way, certain things can be done. And pertaining to the crime, I think the police, the training mentally, socially, some of them have their own mental problems. So there should be proper screening towards mental health in the service. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. But my personal belief is that everyone has some degree of mental illness. I don't think anyone is 100% perfectly all right. All right, let's go back to the phones. Caller, good evening.
Pleasant good night, David Mohammed. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Well, I'm listening on. I'm locked on and listening. But I guess locked on. And I listen to these callers and thing, and I don't know why we taking up the mangoes and injecting it and not dealing with the mango tree. Or we picking up the young pawpaw from the tree and we injecting it and treating it and not treating the pawpaw tree. This thing is a big parental problem that is getting out of hand for some time now. You will see 9 little young men riding bicycle, speeding, riding. Where is their parents? And some of the homes are like this. The mommy pointing the arrow in this direction and daddy pointing it in this direction. Mommy, are going to Rima? Did you speak to your daddy? Daddy, are going to Rima? Did you speak to mommy? They must be pushing one common intention for the better life in the region for we women and we children. And that must be the ambition of the Caribbean man.
The Caribbean man.
Otherwise, I think by now they want the government to do everything. We want the government to do everything. And it's a big parental problem. I think the government should step up on parenting, deal with our parents, and we are going to bring forth good children. That's my contribution, Mr. David.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right. 342-0081 and 466-5391. You can send text messages to 332-0214. WhatsApp messages, that is. All right, let's go back to the phones. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, brother.
Yes, sir.
How you doing? Hey, that speech, the one I played before was well on the ball.
Minister Farrakhan.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole 2.5-hour speech is on blackagendaproject.com.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, and I think slowly people wake up to the idea that, we govern by more greater laws in the, in the cosmos, in the universe and stuff like that. And the thing is that the counteraction to it, as you mentioned, ancient civilizations was, I used to wonder how plenty of them tribes never used to die out until the white people find them and then they start to get sick. How they survive all them centuries, if you understand some of them bush people and all them kind of thing, and they ain't get sick. If you know what I mean, they ain't get this and that. Is only when they discover them, they tell them they need shots for this and shots for that, and that's when all hell breaks loose and all the bacchanal start. But they were surviving good all the time. The whole system built upon, when you start to develop God consciousness, because human is the only person that could actually be God in a physical form or bring about God attributes in a physical form. And that's where we come from. We control matter with mind. It has simple attributes like, for instance, speaking. That's one way we take spirit form and transmit it into into the 3D dimension. I've ever mentioned that there, Brother David. When you speak, right, you don't really have a paragraph. You have it's an emotion. It's a frequency of emotion loaded with data. So let me say you wanted to speak on the police issue. You ain't write down nothing, but yet you could speak all night. Tons of data you have loaded in that invisible emotional data that you have in your head. And, beyond time, you translating that without slowing down and the words pelting out your mouth. But this time it's something kind of colorless and it's an energy-less energy you're speaking from. And that's one of the miracles I discovered over the coronavirus. And the thing is, the more you identify with that invisible part of you that bringing, energies into the third dimension, is the more, even sickness and things wouldn't bother you, that's where we came from. We came from being aware of ourselves, of the God inside ourselves, the spirit that is within us. We use it, but we don't know we use it. And the whole idea of, I don't want to say Zionist, but that eye inside at the top of that pyramid in the dollar, boy, people ain't understanding how deep that evil is in terms of...
All-seeing eye.
Say again?
The all-seeing eye.
Yeah, that real dread, Brother David. It's not even earth evil. First, it's dread. It have people. I don't want to stay too long because it's a multiple pronged discussion. Imagine one of the adages of earth is that wars, murder, mayhem, rape, killing, torture is what controls the earth population when it starts to get overpopulated. Like I was saying, that is a page out of the devil book that he's still writing down in some basement somewhere, if you understand. To believe in this system of controlling the population is part of the capitalist system, if you understand. And it's so brutal that the economic system is designed to exploit the fallout of imagine they cramming God's life inside an invisible, limited, elusive, non-existent economic system. And if the population outgrow this economic system, those who fall out is who are exploited in ways that we don't even understand. Bob Marley sang about it, the ones who eating up all the flesh on our earth. It's kind of literal then, but it's scary. But people have to discover what it really means. And that's why it can have things like a virus and stuff. And one of the things that could conquer a virus, in closing, is that a virus, what they do, they take out a virus out of your body, because your body have trillions and millions of viruses, augment it, and then send it back out now. And the response is what has mashed you up now in terms of the imbalance of the spirit when it gets it. This is just my opinion. Right? There's no official statement or anything. And what they say is that the virus that be trying, whatever they augment, in trying to balance back out inside of your body, because your body contains millions of viruses, is what is weakening you, and then the other things is what is killing you. If you understand what I'm saying, and that's the game they play. And one of the ways to conquer it is if your vibrations of spirituality is very high, because the virus is atoms and molecules and that have a frequency. But if you have a spiritual